Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Todd Foley, CDO and CISO with Lydonia.ai. I'm joined today by Webb, Vice President of Shopper Analytics and Insights at PepsiCo. Ellen, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, happy to be here.
When you look at sort of how you're leveraging data analytics to do that, to optimize customer interactions,
Yeah.
and do it across multiple channels, right? At the same time with the same person, potentially, in both their physical lives and their digital experiences. What recommendations would you give to people about how to approach that, right? What are the principles you use that guide that? Because that's a tough road for anyone in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, as we think about the future, there are just basics I think that shoppers expect regardless of, what the conditions are. And we've recently done some work, again, through a PetViz approach that as we think about the phygital space is, I think some, general principles about how people, can think about driving growth into the future. And again, there's a range of speed that this could happen, and depth of impact. But I would say the first one is convenience. This is something that as long as I've been in this industry is always top of mind.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's a bit of a tweak in it as we think about the future, which is the concept of autonomous convenience. So it's really shifting from thinking about ease and speed into that, plus the ability to offload the mental labor that's associated with shopping. So if you think about, being able to, having to create a list or being able to, find everything that I need in that one space, no matter, what kind of format I'm shopping in, and just having that flexibility. So that's something that we found is absolutely going to be critical to winning with shoppers in the future. And, the phygital, concept plays a lot into that. I would say the second one is really about loyalty. So we talked a little about loyalty earlier in the conversation, and I think, especially, in today's environment, shoppers really want to feel appreciated. They want to feel understood. And they want to they want to feel like, whoever they're buying their groceries from makes you, values you as a person and values your loyalty. And so, that comes to life with, whether it's product recommendations, specific, offers and promotions, but that they're relevant to you. So that concept of precision loyalty of saying, I'm choosing to, shop at your store and to buy your brands, making sure that you're kind of rewarding them on the back end for that. So I'd say that's the second piece. And then the third piece, which kind of, I think, comes along with both of those, is just, assortment. So a lot of what we do, again, is it comes down to what are the products that you're offering to the shopper at that point of purchase. And, that space is so complex and there are so many interconnecting, sets of needs. And, for a shopper, what we talked about it as anticipatory assortment. So how are you anticipating what it is that they're going to be looking for once they get into that store? Do you have the, products that fit the wellness things that I'm looking for, or affordability, or, fun and enjoyment? There's lots of, things that go into, those specific, points of purchase and the, mindset that people are in when they're there. So it's just really, it's a helpful thing that is, I think, it's probably goes beyond helpful. It's something that's absolutely critical to winning with shoppers in the future. So I'd say those three things are the things that we've honed in on. And again, I think, technology helps in certainly each of those spaces, but it also, extends again into the physical store as well.
I think, being able to give people positive reward around their association with a product and with will always drive brand loyalty. But
Yeah.
but you talk with those three things about two things that are a little opposed to each other, right? That autonomous convenience, right? Not having to think about it at all,
Yeah.
really is the promise there. And then assortment, being able to give people myriad choices for what they might do. That that's a difficult tightrope, I would think. You want to make
Yeah.
it everything there, in terms of it being an unlimited menu of selections, or at least being an appropriate one,
Yeah.
and then not having them think too hard at the same time.
Yeah. And I think I would say it's not an endless set of choices, because I think there's lots of, research that said that, too much choice actually feels like you have less choice because it becomes so overwhelming. And I think that's what we certainly try to get into is, what's the right assortment that, meets the bulk of needs that, really it's that balance between having everything, but having the right things. And so I think especially when you think about, balancing, that's the other part of this that comes in, is balancing the shopper needs with just the operational realities of fulfilling that too. So those are the things that we kind of take into account. But it's, as we talk about that, we've got, lots of examples where we've worked with retailers to really optimize their assortment in store relative to the shopper and the demand that's in that specific store. And we know that it works. And so and sometimes you have to make, difficult decisions in terms of what goes in and what comes out, but there's a lot of, again, kind of science and analytics that goes into that work.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I'm sure what you identify as relevant variables are still finite, but it's way more than two from the sounds of
Yes, it is. It is way more than two, for sure. For
it.
sure.
I think as you look at how you're pulling data together and as you're trying to not have a crystal ball, but directly impact some of those things in a measurable way, there's a challenge there, a constant challenge for you and your teams around being able to refine that data, get greater accuracy, have greater impact.
Mhm.
And it's constantly engaging with the business, with the retailers in a way that I think is a little bit different from some people in data roles where while they're involved in that process and that value chain, if you will, of being able
Mhm.
to produce insight and impact the business, you're really playing a very direct role. I think that's both a remarkable tribute to what you and your team do and being able to do that, but it also must give you a unique perspective on the business. Are you routinely engaged for things that maybe would surprise you, or can you share some examples of where maybe some of these phygital approaches have played out at PepsiCo?
Yeah, sure. And I will say, I mean, we the way our team is organized is we do, a lot of the work and then help to enable the balance of the organization to do this. So a lot of our, category management partners or even sales strategy, they're our critical partners in delivering a lot of this to the business. But yeah, again, we've had, I think, tons of success, and I think, different development from our analytics team of being involved in those conversations, which I think is critical. But you asked about a specific example. So if you think about, again, thinking in the concept of problem to solve, we have, this happens across the business on a fairly regular basis. You've got a retail partner that's got, shoppers with a lot of different business needs. So if you think about a, convenience and gas store, they can have, thousands of stores. And even in a particular zip code, you might have two stores that are, less than a mile apart, but have very different, consumer base, shopper base, different needs, different demand profiles. And so as you think about that, it's really important to say, okay, what are the things that we need to do to balance, again, that kind of the concept of anticipatory assortment, but also paired with, again, how do we operationally do this so it's not, you don't have hundreds of thousands of unique planograms across the organization. So in this situation, we realized, okay, what are the, things that we can do to ensure that we've got the right assortment in the right store to help them to grow dollar share within the market. So again, growth being the goal. So what we did is really worked with them again through a PetViz approach and said, okay, we want to drive an advantage category strategy and planogram strategy to really deliver against what those shopper needs are, with the goal of driving sales, profit, and market share. Again, making sure that the shopper is central to that. So what we did is leveraged our proprietary store DNA solution to really understand who is the shopper in each of these stores and what are they buying, both, again, when they're inside and outside of the store. So looking at that at a store level and then clustering and segmenting that up into different, targets, or basically clusters, that help to, again, say, okay, we're going to be practical in terms of, how many clusters that make sense statistically with what's viable operationally, and then targets had to execute the assortment. So I mentioned Store DNA earlier. So that's a key data set that we have that combines data from, we've got data on over 500,000 retail stores. It helps us to understand what the stores sell, what the attributes of those stores are, understanding what are the things that happen around those stores, so different points of interest that help us create a profile and say, okay, here's the profile of each stores. And again, how do those start to cluster together? So it's a really powerful data set that we have, that we can, point into commercial solutions. And so in this example, based on the demand dynamics, the shopper dynamics, we landed on 4 unique clusters. One focused on healthier items, one focused on functional beverages, another focused on flavors, and then the last one was just kind of your core mainstream beverages. So once those clusters were determined, then the team created the planograms to reflect, again, the categories and brands that over-index within those clusters. And so this was in 2023. The single serve beverages, so your kind of 20-ounce on the go beverages, grew about 9% in the stores that were clustered. Compared to the growth was about 6% in the stores that were not clustered. So a pretty, significant difference between those two. And then year to date in 2024, that those trends continued. So the clustered stores are growing about 5% versus the stores that were not clustered are about flat. So, and this is, again, talking about ranges, these numbers were, we consistently see, really strong growth when we do this. And so it's, something that we continue to work with our customer partners to initiate.
There's an almost immediate gratification there where you're
Yeah.
able to track the real material impact of the work you
Yeah.
do and how it's being leveraged out in the field. And
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a constant feedback loop too,
Yes.
to always be tweaking and improving and looking to take other approaches. But it
Yeah.
sounds like you've got an embarrassment of riches, and you talked about a dynamic where you were trying to limit the number of clusters that you were applying, just
Sure.
from a feasibility standpoint. In theory, you could create 500,000 personalized
Oh, sure. You can create, we can create all the versions in the world, but, we have to really be, and I think that's part of the, the benefit of sitting in the organization where we do, we are very conscious of the operational complexities that, we don't want to create, a nightmare for our field and for customers to execute. And so there's lots of those operational considerations that come into play as we do this to make sure, again, that we're balancing, what's the right thing from a shopper perspective, what's the right thing to, grow the category, but then making sure that we can execute it at scale is just as important.
and you have the ability to measure those results in
Yeah.
such a quick way that you're never asking for too much, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
That's, I think, a fantastic position to be in. It's
Yeah.
something that's just we always like to talk about the connection between insight and impact,
Mhm.
and being able to kind of improve that time to impact, to not just improve the time to data.
Mhm.
Um, you have that in a very concrete way that I know a lot of people would be jealous of. That you have that ability and you've had that impact on the business in such a measurable way. Do you? Does that create additional engagement because you're able to measure it that way? Because you make such a difference in the business? Do you then get asked for more and more? Is it?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Here's the other thing that I think is important to say is that, as we do this, it's not a one size fits all. So in this situation, we landed on 4 clusters and I talked through what that, but for a different chain, it might look different. So we really have to tailor the solutions based on the specific needs and problems to solve of those, the different customers that we have. But the other piece is, I talked about the success that we have, but a lot of this has come, on the heels of tons of test and learn. So there are things sometimes we try and we may not get the results that I talked through on that one. And so it's then going through the postmortem and say, okay, what do we think was, what went wrong? What are the things that we need to do moving forward? So there's, again, that I think being able to learn together and say, okay, here are the thing, we agree that this is the right thing to try. Let's make sure that we test it. And, in that example, we had the ability to look at clustered stores versus non-clustered stores. We don't always have that. And so the more that we try to do to, as we try to further this agenda, it's about creating those, collecting those proof points to say like, hey, we're not just making this stuff up. We have reason to believe that it works. And I think that's the other piece of this is, we can't just go in and do whatever we want in these stores. It has to come, to be done together with our retailer partners. And, we have to have the credibility and the proof points to get, them aligned to doing that. So, which I think, at the end of the day, it makes us better because we're, really being thoughtful about the things that we, believe in and also being honest where we think that we've got potential, here's a potential concern or things that we might, that might keep us from, enjoying the success that we want to in this. And so, again, really thinking about with them, what's required end to end all the way through execution and making those required trade-offs. And so I think it's, as we've gone through this and, all the things that you said are absolutely true. We've got a ton of great, resources at our fingertips to be able to do this, but we have to be humble. And there's just a ton of lessons that we've learned in the process. And The business is we have to be agile because the business changes every day, and the world that we're operating with is fickle. And so that ability to be agile and responsive to what those needs are is critically important.
Yeah, and you have a need to create that same trust with your business users and your retailers and your partners, just as we were talking about that consumer trust that you have
Yes.
to be able to move the needle on. That humility and accountability that
Yeah.
you and your team assume
Mhm.
is key to making sure that that continues, that
Yeah.
your guidance is sought after and embraced instead of it being something that's seen as a challenge or having lower value. I,
Yeah.
I, I think that there's a virtuous cycle there that your team has to be involved in at all points, right? Not just being able to produce the insight or to make recommendations, but to also be accountable for that and to be able
Yeah.
to adjust. And I,
Yeah.
I think that level of engagement with the business is truly pretty unique. I think
Good.
you've created a rare value prop that's just immediate in terms of business engagement and responsibility for impacting the business.
Yeah.
I, that's got to mean that you're asked to do more and more all the time, though.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, it is. But I think it's, like anything, even if we had endless resources, just because we, can do it doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of prioritization, and that's a lot of also what we're trying to do is how much more can we, automate through technology in terms of, a lot of this stuff so that we're, at the top of our conversation, I talked about, the process of, data engineering and data cleansing and management. So the more that we can offload those types of work or automate it to make that less time so that we can free up the energy and the time for, the value driving activities is what we're doing. But you're spot on. Like we do absolutely have to make trade-offs, and it happens every single day. And it's one of those things where we wish we could, take on all the projects. But at some point we reach, the end of our capacity. So it's a constant trade-off, and making, again, those decisions on where we think that we can add the most value, but also helping to enable, the teams across the organization to, again, democratize analytics and have them enabled to do the work as well, and certainly be able to talk about it with their customers. And I think a lot of times analytics feels like it's this, thing that needs to be, I think people sometimes are scared of it. And that's a lot of times what we're trying to do is just making it approachable. And it's something that people can understand, and really making, again, we want people to want to, make analytics driven decisions and impact the business in that way. And so that's part of it too, is we don't necessarily own all of it. Again, we've got an army of people who are out, taking these, capabilities out to our customers as well, which is a great, part of the design that we have as well.
You make such an immediate impact on the business with what you do, and you're involved in from a go-to-market standpoint and both a retailer partner customer engagement standpoint in such an immediate way. You said something there that I think is really critical, that even as there's greater demand for your team's time and focus, you're trying to leverage technology to take some of the time-consuming drudgery out of what they do to allow them to be more innovative and to focus on greater demand. But you're also trying to bring it closer to the business and democratize analytics in a way that truly allows you to address that demand. I
Mhm.
think self-service data has been a term that's been around so long, I'm not sure it means anything anymore.
Yeah.
How do you approach that democratization of analytics at PepsiCo?
Yeah, I would say it's through, I mean, I'd say a lot of it, again, we've got partners to help us do that. It's about, it's just as important of, I think people have the trust in the analytics, but it also, again, to my comment on making it approachable, it's what is the user interface to, to the point where people don't realize they're being, an analytics person when they're, poking through a, visualization or a dashboard, and they're like, oh, this is amazing. I can't wait to take this to my customer. And so it's really about that user experience that we found that is super important. And, at no point today, I talked to you about the different kinds of data sets that we have, but I haven't talked about here's how many, petabytes of data we have, like, because that doesn't really matter. It's what you're actually doing with it. And so I think, we've got a lot of partnerships with, some of our digital engagements team or digital digital transformation team that are, working to, bring a lot of this stuff to our front line. And they might not even know that it's driven by, a massive analytics model, but they know that they've got information at their fingertips that they can use. And so again, it's really about simplifying and making it approachable and making people want to use analytics and seeing it work for them. And that, I think that pull model is something that we found to be very, very impactful instead of, several, probably, I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but I think we were in a, if you build it, they will come type of environment, and you're building this big fancy thing. And people are like, that sounds super cool, but I don't know what to do with it, versus now the model that we're really thinking again through this PepViz approach is listening for what are those questions and how do we bring those, into solutions that people can actually use on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's also this mindset of, little wins are important too, and they start to pile up. And so making sure that, again, you're starting to get those proof points to say, okay, this is not just a little idea, it's a big idea and we should do something with it. So again, I think that concept of approachability and democratization, and, we're not giving everybody full access to all the data that we have, because that just would be, a bad idea on multiple levels. But again, being curated for the things that matter and getting it into a way where people just see it as something that, is a natural part of how they run their business versus something that somebody's telling them that they have to do.
Yeah, I think it's much more impactful that way too. Truly remarkable. And it's been a pleasure hearing about what you've done at PepsiCo, how you're approaching it. As I said, I think you're pretty far on the scale in terms of where people would like to go to. You're there in a lot of ways, though. As you said, that comes with its own challenges, right? Of demand and and constant engagement, and being able to combine both the physical and the digital worlds in a way that's immediate and impactful. Before we wrap, is there any guidance you'd give to others in your position, maybe who haven't reached that evolution that PepsiCo has? Any lessons you've learned along the way that you want to share?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. I would say, again, the first one is just really listening to your business partners and focusing on the things that you can drive, that more immediate impact to build trust and create pull for what you're trying to do. Because I think, part of having been in, a category management role, or just as part of the bigger sales organization is, I'm an insights person, but I'm always selling. Like it's a very objective perspective, but I'm, selling the validity of the analytics that the team is doing, or, selling the perspective of what that, selling, somebody to care about the shopper. So, but again, it's being empathetic and understanding of what is it that matters to the person on the other side of the desk or the computer screen. And so that you're bringing things that are relevant to them. And I would say the second thing is, I think you have to have some level of humility and say, like, again, like, there's a lot of things that I don't know about what they're trying to solve. And so, and being able to come to a collaboration saying, okay, here's the value that I think I can bring to a conversation versus what somebody else can, and really being super clear about that. And I think, throughout our conversation, this afternoon, there have been so many things where I've talked about all the cross-functional partners that we have. We could not have the impact that we have or do what we do without our cross-functional partners. So whether it's category management, whether it's sales, whether it's, IT, strategy and transformation, it takes a village to get this stuff done. And, I think being able to, build that coalition, again, focus on what are the things that you want to do is super important. And then I think the last thing is just, choosing, we talked about prioritization, choose one or two things and do them really well. And, again, use that to build the trust. Cause I think sometimes where things fall flat is when you try to do 15 things and you fail at all of them, instead of focusing your efforts in a couple of places and getting those wins. So I would say those are probably the three, biggest learnings. And then the last one is just be patient. These things take time and sometimes it can be a frustrating journey, but once you start to see it, things pick up, and it's a really exciting thing to see, the impact of the work really take place, which is very fulfilling.
That's great guidance. And Ellen, thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you listening, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. But Ellen, it's truly been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.